Extra, extra, we're back with another entry. In today's topic, we'll be picking up right where we left off. We're in part 2 of a series that I called White Women, Impetus for Destruction. To make the cut for White Women, Impetus for Destruction series, you have to be a white female that's equally or more destructive than your white male counterpart in North America. Our first entry was about Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary's real name was Mary Mallon, an Irish-born maid that turned into a cook. She was very disgusting and didn't wash her hands and was believed to be asymptomatic when it came to the disease called typhoid fever. She also was believed to infect 53 people and killed 3. She maintained her innocence, didn't want to cooperate with the health department, and just was very delusional. But she was also very destructive. As our metaphorical snowball gains momentum, our next metaphorical avalanche goes under scrutiny. She goes by the name of Ghislaine Maxwell. And let's see how destructive Miss Ghislaine is. Some of our metaphorical avalanches, such as Miss Ghislaine Maxwell, may not be widely known. So let's start off with who she is. Ghislaine Maxwell was born in 1961 in Maisons-Laffitte, France, the 9th and youngest child of Elizabeth, a French-born scholar, and Robert Maxwell, a Czechoslovak-born British media proprietor. Her father was from a Jewish family and her mother was of Huguenot descent. Maxwell was born 2 days before a car accident left her older brother Michael in a prolonged coma at age 15, unresponsive for several years until his death in 1967. Her mother reflected that the accident had an effect on the entire family, with Ghislaine becoming anorexic while still a toddler. Throughout childhood, Ghislaine resided with her family in Oxford at Headington Hill Hall, a 53-room mansion where the offices of Pergamon Press, a publishing company run by Robert Maxwell, were also located. Her mother said all her children were brought up Anglican. These seem like nice, religious, rich people. They had a big mansion. Maxwell attended Marlborough College and Balliol College, Oxford. Maxwell had an unusually close relationship with her father and was widely credited with being her father's favorite child. The Times reported that Robert Maxwell did not permit Ghislaine to bring her boyfriends home or to be seen with them publicly after she started attending Oxford University. Red flag. You're unusually close with your dad to the point where you're called his favorite child. Then when you get older and go to college, you can't have boyfriends. Career. Maxwell was a prominent member of the London social scene in the 1980s. She founded a women's club named after the original Kit Kat Club and was a director of Oxford United Football Club during her father's ownership. She also worked at the European, a publication Robert Maxwell had started. According to Tom Bauer, writing for the Sunday Times, in 1986, Ghislaine's father invited her to visit his new yacht in a shipyard in Holland to celebrate its christening in her honor as the Lady Ghislaine. Maxwell was reported to have spent a large amount of time in the late 1980s aboard her father's yacht, which was equipped with a jacuzzi, a sauna, a gym, and private disco. The Scotsman said Robert Maxwell had also, quote, tailor-made a New York company for her, end quote. The company, which focused on corporate gifts, was not profitable. The Sunday Times reported that Maxwell flew to New York on 5 November 1990 to deliver an envelope on her father's behalf that, unknown to her, was part of, quote, a plot initiated by her father to steal $200 million, end quote, from Berlitz shareholders. Dancing Hair Yacht, formerly known as the Lady Ghislaine.
Well, if it ain't my favorite niece, Ghislaine, let your uncle hold some money, Ghislaine. Ah, you know me, baby, I'm broke. You ain't broke. I can smell a cracker with money.
After Maxwell's father purchased the New York Daily News in January 1991, he sent her to New York City to act as his emissary. In May 1991, Maxwell and her father took the Concorde on business to New York, where he quickly departed for Moscow and left her to represent his interests at an event honoring Simon Wiesenthal. In November 1991, Robert Maxwell's body was found floating in the sea near the Canary Islands, and his luxury yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. Immediately following his death, Ghislaine flew to Tenerife, where the yacht was stationed to attend to his business paperwork. Though a verdict of death by accidental drowning was recorded, Maxwell has since said she believes her father was murdered, commenting in 1997, quote, "He did not commit suicide. That was just not consistent with his character. I think he was murdered," end quote. After his death, Robert Maxwell was found to have fraudulently appropriated the pension assets of Mirror Group newspaper, a company that he ran and in which he held a large share of ownership to support its share price. There were reportedly over £440 million in pension funds missing, which left the surviving Maxwell family members and the British government in a bind to repay the 32,000 people affected. Two of Maxwell's brothers, Ian and Kevin, who were the most involved with their father in daily business dealings, were arrested on 19 June 1992 and charged with fraud related to the Mirror Group pension scandal. The brothers were acquitted of the charges 3.5 years later in January 1996. Them people will kill you over their daddy watch, Robert. Maxwell moved to the United States in 1991, just after her father's death. She was photographed boarding a Concorde to cross the Atlantic, causing outrage amidst the pension scandal due to the high cost of flights on that aircraft. She reportedly receives, quote, an £80,000 annual legacy from a trust set up by her father, end quote. In 1992, she had moved to an apartment of an Iranian friend overlooking Central Park. At the time, Maxwell worked at a real estate office on Madison Avenue and was reported to be socializing with a group that includes Ivana Trump and Adnan Khashoggi's son. She quickly rose to a wider prominence as a New York City socialite. We've been properly introduced to Ghislaine Maxwell. We've seen her upbringing, her close relationship to her father, the money scandal tied around her father and her brothers. We're going to see her involvement with another man, Jeffrey Epstein. We'll get back to him another time. But for now, Ghislaine Maxwell is on her way to the United States of America. Ghislaine Maxwell in North America and her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell first met American financier Jeffrey Epstein in the early 1990s at a New York party following, quote, a difficult breakup with Count Gianfranco Sacagna, end quote, of the Siga Hotels clan. Maxwell had a romantic relationship with Epstein for several years in the early 1990s and remained closely associated with him for decades afterwards. The nature of their relationship remains unclear. In a 2009 deposition, several of Epstein's household employees testified that Epstein referred to her as his, quote, main girlfriend, end quote, who also hired, fired, and supervised his staff starting around 1992. She has also been referred to as the, quote, lady of the house, end quote, by Epstein's staff and as his, quote, aggressive assistant, end quote. In a 2003 Vanity Fair profile on Epstein, author Vicky Ward said Epstein referred to Maxwell as, quote, my best friend, end quote. Ward also observed that Maxwell seemed, quote, to organize much of his life, end quote. Maxwell has attracted press coverage for her friendship with Prince Andrew, Duke of York, the second son of Queen Elizabeth II, who attended social functions with her in New York. She introduced Epstein to Prince Andrew, and the three often socialized together. In 2000, Maxwell and Epstein attended a party thrown by Prince Andrew at the Queen's estate in Norfolk, England, reportedly for Maxwell's 39th birthday. In a November 2019 interview with the BBC, Prince Andrew confirmed that Maxwell and Epstein had attended an event at his invitation, but he denied that it was anything more than a, quote, straightforward shooting weekend, end quote. Maxwell has also been associated and photographed with Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and lawyer Alan Dershowitz. In 1995, Epstein renamed one of his companies the Ghislaine Corporation. The Palm Beach, Florida company was later dissolved in 1998. In 2008, Epstein was convicted of soliciting a minor for prostitution and served 13 months of an 18-month jail sentence. Following Epstein's release from jail, although Maxwell continued to attend prominent social functions, she and Epstein were no longer seen together publicly. By late 2015, Maxwell had largely retreated from attending social functions. Rich people are something else. Weren't you and Prince Andrew just partying with the boy Jeff Epstein? Soon as he get in a little legal trouble, you gotta dodge him, huh? I see you. Civil cases and accusations. Virginia Roberts versus Maxwell, 2015. Details of a civil lawsuit made public in January 2015 contained a deposition from, quote, Jane Doe 3, end quote, that accused Maxwell of recruiting her in 1999 when she was a minor and grooming her to provide sexual services for Epstein. A 2018 expose by Julie K. Brown in the Miami Herald revealed Jane Doe 3 to be Virginia Giuffre, who was previously known as Virginia Roberts. Giuffre met Maxwell at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida, where Giuffre was working at the time. She asserted that Maxwell had introduced her to Epstein, after which she was, quote, groomed by the two of them for his pleasure, including lessons in Epstein's preferences during oral sex, end quote. Maxwell has repeatedly denied any involvement in Epstein's crimes. In a 2015 statement, Maxwell rejected allegations that she has acted as a procurer for Epstein and denied that she had, quote, facilitated Prince Andrew's acts of sexual abuse, end quote. Her spokesperson said, quote, the allegations made against Ghislaine Maxwell are untrue, end quote, and she, quote, strongly denies allegations of a unsavory nature which have appeared in the British press and elsewhere, and reserves her right to seek redress at the repetition of such old defamatory claims, end quote. Giuffre asserted that Maxwell and Epstein had trafficked her and other underage girls, often at sex parties hosted by Epstein at his homes in New York, New Mexico, Palm Beach, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Maxwell called her a liar. Giuffre sued Maxwell for defamation in federal court in the Southern District of New York in 2015. While details of the settlement have not been made public, in May 2017, the case was settled in Giuffre's favor, with Maxwell paying Giuffre, quote, millions, end quote. Sarah Ransom versus Epstein and Maxwell, 2017. In 2017, Sarah Ransom filed a suit in the United States District Court, Southern District of New York, against Epstein and Maxwell, alleging that Maxwell hired her to give massages to Epstein and later threatened to physically harm her or destroy her career prospects if she did not comply with their sexual demands at his mansion in New York and on his private Caribbean island, Little St. James. The suit was settled in 2018 under undisclosed terms. Affidavit filed by Maria Farmer, 2019. On 16 April 2019, Maria Farmer went public and filed a sworn affidavit in federal court in New York, alleging that she and her 15-year-old sister Annie had been sexually assaulted by Epstein and Maxwell in separate locations in 1996. Farmer's affidavit was filed in support of a defamation suit between Virginia Giuffre against Alan Dershowitz. According to the affidavit, Farmer had met Maxwell and Epstein at a New York art gallery reception in 1995. The affidavit says that in the summer of the following year, they hired her to work on an art project in billionaire businessman Leslie Wexner's Ohio mansion, where she was then sexually assaulted by both Maxwell and Epstein. Farmer reported the incident to the New York Police Department and the FBI. Her affidavit also stated that during the same summer, Epstein flew her then 15-year-old sister Annie to his New Mexico property, where he and Maxwell molested her on a massage table. Farmer was interviewed for CBS This Morning in November 2019, where she detailed the 1996 assault and alleged that Maxwell had repeatedly threatened both her career and her life after the assault. Jennifer Arrayas versus Epstein's estate, Maxwell and Jane Doe's 1 through 3, 2019. On 14 August 2019, Jennifer Arrayas filed a lawsuit in New York County Supreme Court against Epstein's estate, Maxwell, and 3 unnamed members of his staff. The lawsuit was made possible under New York State's New Child Victims Act, which took effect on the same date. Arrayas later amended her complaint on October 8, 2019, with the names of the previously unidentified women enablers to include Leslie Groff, Kimberly Espinosa, and the late Rosalind Fontanilla. Priscilla Doe versus Epstein's estate, 2019. Ghislaine Maxwell was named in one of 3 lawsuits filed in New York on 20 August 2019 against the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. The woman filing the suit, identified as, quote, Priscilla Doe, end quote, claimed that she was recruited in 2006 and trained by Maxwell with step-by-step instructions on how to provide sexual services for Epstein. Annie Farmer versus Maxwell and Epstein's estate, 2019. Annie Farmer, represented by David Boies, sued Maxwell and Epstein's estate in federal district court in Manhattan in November 2019, accusing them of rape, battery, and false imprisonment, and seeking unspecified damages. Jane Doe versus Maxwell and Epstein's estate, 2020. In January 2020, a lawsuit was filed against Maxwell and Epstein, alleging that they recruited a 13-year-old music student at the Interlochen Center for the Arts in 1994 and subjected her to sexual abuse. The suit states that Jane Doe was repeatedly sexually assaulted by Epstein over a 4-year period, and that Maxwell played a key role both in her recruitment and by participating in the assaults. Maxwell versus Epstein's estate, Darren K. N. Dyke, Richard D. Kahn, and NES LLC, 2020. Maxwell filed a lawsuit on 12 March 2020 against Epstein's estate, which claimed she had been a longtime employee of Epstein from 1998 to 2006, who had served to manage his property holdings in the U.S. Virgin Islands, New York, New Mexico, Florida, and Paris, while continuing to deny any knowledge or involvement in his criminal activities. According to the lawsuit filed in Superior Court in the U.S. Virgin Islands, Maxwell was seeking damages for legal fees associated with defending herself against her accusers that she claims Epstein had promised to cover for her. Dispute over release of court documents. On 2 July 2019, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit ordered the unsealing of documents from the earlier civil suit against Maxwell by Virginia Giuffre. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on 6 July 2019 at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey and charged with sex trafficking and sex trafficking conspiracy. Maxwell requested a rehearing in a federal appeals court on 17 July 2019 in an effort to keep documents sealed that were part of a suit by Virginia Giuffre. On 9 August 2019, the first batch of documents were unsealed and released from the earlier defamation suit by Giuffre against Maxwell. Epstein was found dead on 10 August 2019 after reportedly hanging himself in his Manhattan prison cell. Later in August 2019, the Rolling Stone magazine and the Time of Israel online newspaper reported that the surroundings of the Epstein case and Ghislaine Maxwell are continuously followed by investigators. Maxwell and her lawyers continued to argue against the further release of court documents in December 2019. Reuters confirmed on 27 December 2019 that Maxwell and others are under investigation by the FBI for facilitating Epstein's criminal activities. Attempts to locate Maxwell to serve new lawsuits. The New York Times said that by 2016, Maxwell was no longer being photographed at events. By 2017, her lawyers claimed before a judge that they did not know her address. They further stated that she was in London, but they did not believe she had a permanent residence. Maxwell has a history of being unreachable during legal proceedings. During the lawsuit filed in 2017 from Ransom against Maxwell, District Judge John G. Coelho granted a motion for, quote, alternative service, end quote, on the grounds that the plaintiff's efforts to reach Maxwell were persistently thwarted. These included hiring a private investigation firm that attempted service at 3 physical addresses, sending information to several email addresses, and reaching out to the lawyers actively representing Maxwell in another lawsuit who refused to become a, quote, general agent of process, end quote, to relay the information to her. According to court documents from a lawsuit filed by Epstein against Bradley Edwards, a representative for several of his accusers, in 2010, Maxwell had agreed to provide a deposition in the case, but reportedly left the country one day before Edwards was scheduled to fly to New York to take her deposition, quote, claiming she needed to return to the UK to be with her deathly ill mother, end quote, with no intention of returning to the United States. However, Maxwell returned within a month to attend Chelsea Clinton's wedding. In January 2020, it was reported that Maxwell had refused to allow her lawyers to be served with several lawsuits in which she has been directly named in 2019 and 2020, including one by former and from Reyes. While Maxwell's lawyers continue to argue on her behalf against the release of additional court documents from the Jew Free versus Maxwell lawsuit, they claim to not know where she is or to have permission to accept the recent lawsuits filed against her. Well, this is the part of the entry where we part ways. Leave me a comment. Who's more destructive in your mind, Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell? Both of them committed sexual assault, sexual trafficking of minors, and pedophilia. Remember, that's what this segment is about. To see who's more destructive, the white female or her counterpart, the white male. It's called White Women, Impetus for Destruction. Do you think Ghislaine Maxwell is similar to Mary Mallon, who flees when it's time to face the music? Who do you think has destroyed more lives? Ghislaine Maxwell with being a pedophile, or Mary Mallon with typhoid fever, being nasty and cooking food for rich people? It's a hard one, isn't it? If you like the content, hit the like button. If you're generous and want others to see what's going on over here at Jaundice Journal, hit the share button. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Until next time, peace.